Hey folks, Joe with JACBC Baseball Collector here, coming at you with an NL East preview. So we've already covered the Central last week, the West divisions the week before that, and today and tomorrow we're going to hit the NL West and the AL West. I've said it before, these videos are proven to be a little bit long form, but I'm having a lot of fun doing them. So those of you who do watch them and are enjoying them, I'm really happy for that support. Just as a quick, primer recap of how I structure these videos. If you're new here, I'll go through all 5 teams in the division. I'll go through their notable offseason moves, some additions, some losses. I'll do a stud and a dud, so kind of a guy who has a bit of star power, someone who I expect to be maybe a bust or regress this season. We'll do a prospect to watch, and then we'll do a section around, bounce back, a sleeper, a breakout candidate, something along those lines, and then we'll do a quick over/under based on Barstool Sports over/under figures for the 2023 season. Barstool Sportsbook, I should say, over/under figures. So, without further ado, we're going to get right into it here for the NL East. And start with the Washington Nationals, a team that is sure to be potentially one of the worst, if not the worst team in the majors this year. I know a lot of folks are projecting them to be in the absolute basement, and when you look at this roster, it's really easy to see why. So we'll start with some notable offseason moves. In the additions department, they didn't do a whole ton. A couple of decent things around the edges. Corey Dickerson they added. Dom Smith, who should play every day. He's not a bad little player. Jeter Downs, who I pulled his Golden Mirror SSP out of my 2023 Series 1 Jumbo box, so definitely go check out that video. That was really fun. He was actually on the Red Sox in that video. He got DFA'd there and picked up by the Nationals, so they're really scraping the bottom of the barrel. J-Mar Candelario. As far as losses go, they lost some pretty decent players. They lost Nelson Cruz, Luke Voigt, who they had for a partial piece of the season last year. I think it's part of the Juan Soto trade. Joe Ross and A.J. Alexy. So nothing really too notable. They certainly didn't get better. I don't know if they got worse. I don't know if they could have possibly gotten worse, but they definitely didn't get better. All right, stud and dud. So their stud, it was really hard to pick one from this roster. The team is just so dreadful. But you know what? I decided to go with Keibert Ruiz, as I'm bumping the camera a little bit here. I decided to go with Keibert Ruiz. I got this nice little, what is this, out of, I think, Chronicles, a nice little parallel there of Keibert Ruiz back when he was still with the Dodgers, I believe, here. But like I said, this should just show you how bad the roster is. I had a really hard time choosing somebody for this. I almost went with nobody, but I figured I had to do something. In a different time, in a different world, it probably could have been Steven Strasburg on this roster. We'll get to him in a little bit. But Keibert Ruiz is the 170th ranked fantasy player heading into the 2023 season. I was doing some research on ESPN because I have some drafts this week. He's the 170th ranked overall player, and that's the best of the bunch on the Nationals, which is just really, really bad. So this guy's basically been a one-WAR player. He's obviously still young. He could become a solid catcher, but he's, maybe the best the Nationals have to offer at the moment. At least as far as guys who have proven it a little bit. We'll get to some of their other, young budding stars in a little. But the roster going into opening day is just truly, truly dreadful. Dud time. I just mentioned him. I said we were going to talk about him. We're going to talk about Steven Strasburg here a little bit. So, he's injured once again. He hasn't really been a relevant pitcher at the major league level since 2019. He's been either injured or bad. It's mainly been injury, for the last 3 years and now heading into the 4th season of this stuff. When he was at his best, he was a really, really fun pitcher to watch. I mean, when he was on, the way he would just carve up lineups, strike guys out, pumping that high 90s, 100-mile-an-hour fastball, that nasty, devastating breaking stuff. Like, when he was, through those, 2000s and 10s, I think he came into the league in 2010. This is his first Bowman Chrome. When was this from? 2000? Yeah, I think this was 2009 or 2010. He was just unbelievable. I mean, he was drafted first overall. They really fast-tracked him to the majors, I believe, but he got, hurt. Big shocker there, but I mean, I think we're kind of nearing the end of the road with this guy. He's had a number of arm problems, a number of injury problems. He was one of, like I said, the greats to watch pitch. Maybe not an all-time great statistically just because the injuries derailed him, but he was always really fun to watch pitch. I got to see a decent amount of him early in his career, and then I just don't think he's ever going to regain his form. So I'm not expecting much out of him this year, and I just don't know if he's ever going to get back to that star form. from the kind of mid 2010s there. All right, prospect watch. So the Nationals, according to Keith Law at The Athletic, have the 11th ranked farm system, so they do potentially have reinforcements coming. They definitely loaded that farm system back up. As I'm trying to kill the glare and knocking the stands over, they definitely loaded the farm system up nicely with that Juan Soto trade. They got a number of really nice prospects from the Padres last season. But we're going to focus on one guy who actually did come over in that trade, and it's James Wood. James Wood, he was part, like I said, he was part of that Juan Soto deal. They also got Robert Hassel in that deal from the Padres, another guy that everyone probably remembers from Bowman Chase a few years back. But James Wood, you can see this is his first Bowman Chrome out of a Mojo pack from 2021 Bowman, and he's the 10th ranked prospect on average right now, which is pretty darn good. So, like I said, reinforcements are coming. He actually slipped into the second round in the draft, a couple of years ago. So he really might end up looking like a steal later on if he pans out the way that he's projected. If he really lives up to that top 10 prospect status, being drafted in the second round, he's really might look like a steal. So he was a monster in A ball last year. So he played all his entire season, if I'm not mistaken, in A ball. He hit .313 with a .956 OPS. So that's, obviously really solid. He had 12 homers. He had 20 stolen bases. So a really nice all-around season, showing a little bit of pop in the bat, obviously showing a bunch of speed. He's only 20 years old. He was drafted out of high school. And one thing I didn't know about him, and I didn't realize, like even just like looking at his card or anything like that, before I did a little bit of this research, he's 6'7". So, I mean, it's really difficult for guys that size to, stay within themselves, to have, to kind of command the strike zone, to get proper plate coverage, all that kind of stuff. I mean, we've seen Aaron Judge do it, but he's, just kind of a specimen and a special guy. But those kind of big, tall guys like that, it's really difficult for them sometimes to stay within it. So, if he can kind of keep his size under wraps, for lack of a better way of putting it, he could turn into a really, really nice star, or a really, really nice player and potentially a star. And just given how absolutely dreadful the Nationals roster is and the whole makeup of their team right now, he could certainly be fast-tracked to the major leagues if he keeps impressing the way he has thus far with the Padres and post-trade. All right, we're going to go with a potential breakout candidate. Maybe you'd consider him a sleeper. He's a guy a lot of people know and love. He was a rookie in 2022 products last year. He was a big chase a few years ago in Bowman. And that's going to be C.J. Abrams. So you see this very nice franchise favorites autograph from Bowman's Best. That is numbered to 100. Numbered to just 100. Very nice card here. I think I got this in a break on the LSU Maniac page about a year or so ago. So a really nice card that I've been holding on to, hoping this guy breaks out. So he obviously had a really slow start to his MLB career. So in 2022, he came up with the Padres. He only had a .604 OPS, really got off to quite a slow start. But he's clearly mastered the minors. If you look at his numbers in the minor leagues, he's a .331 hitter with an .896 OPS across all different levels. And he had a really good showing in AAA last year when he did kind of bounce back and forth up and down from the major league level. So he's certainly mastered the minors. He's ready for the majors. It's now he just needs to adjust to that league and kind of make that next step. He's another really young guy. He's only 22 years old, and he plays tremendous defense. Expect he'll be the full-time. He certainly will be the full-time shortstop for the Nationals this year. Obviously, if he's healthy, he's got speed. Like I said, a good defense. He can swipe some bags, but he just needs to continue maturing, and he badly needs to start taking some walks. I think it was like 90 games he played at the major league level last year. He walked 5 times, which is just really, really bad. I don't know if it's that he was chasing pitches or he was just overly aggressive or what it was, but he seems to, go after it, and he really wants to put the ball in play. If he shows a little bit of patience, he starts taking his walks. I think some of those numbers that we saw in the minor leagues, maybe even over a 300 average, especially with his speed, especially with some of the rule changes with the shift and other things, we're going to see that follow pretty quickly. All right, so over-under time for the Nationals. This is, I think, going to be a relatively easy one here. So their over-under is 59.5 wins. They won 55 games last year, and this, to me, is an easy under. I mean, I don't know how anyone could possibly think they got better last year than from last year. They may have, frankly, have gotten worse, and there is a really good chance, other than maybe them and the Oakland Athletics, that they're the worst team in the major leagues this year. I've said it a number of times. Dreadful roster, just a really, really horrific roster that this team has got for themselves this year. They're going to be in for a long, long season. All right, moving on to the Miami Marlins. Interesting team. You know, a lot of young talent, like they always do. They don't sign big, long, big money contracts. Off-season moves. I'm going to show these guys off again. I already kind of showcased them a little bit during our Twins preview, but it was the Luis Urias for Pablo Lopez trade. So they got rid of Pablo Lopez, who was their probably number 2 or 3 pitcher, and got the AL batting champion in Luis Urias. So, trading from a position of strength and picking up something that they needed, which was a little bit of contact hitting. As far as other additions go, they added Johnny Cueto, so a veteran starter there, has had a really nice career. Gene Segura has had some good years with the Phillies. Jacob Amaya and Yuli Gurriel they brought in recently on a minor league deal. And then the other losses were Brian Anderson, who was a staple with that team for quite a while, and then Miguel Rojas. Stud and dud. The stud was an absolute no-brainer. It's going to be Sandy Alcantara. Here's his Topps rookie from 2019 or 2018, Series 2. This was actually I had just sitting in my random rookies box that I decided to go through a couple months back, and I pulled out and I said, hey, this guy just won the Cy Young Award. So, at the time when I first pulled it, I was like, who's Sandy Alcantara? He's just some random pitcher from the Marlins. And now it turns out this guy's a Cy Young Award winner. So, he did win the Cy Young last year. He's the best player on this team, I think, by far. He throws a ton of innings, which I didn't even realize before I took a closer look at this. He threw 228 innings last year with 6 complete games. So you just hope he doesn't run out of gas. But that's just something you don't see anymore, right? You don't see guys going that deep that often and throwing that many innings. And he's not even like one of these big strikeout guys or anything like that. Like, he doesn't induce contact. He gets a lot of ground balls. So he's proven to be a very special pitcher, and I think he's at the top of a lot of people's list to repeat as Cy Young, which I really wouldn't be surprised if he does that. So, like I said, really nice year last year with the Cy Young win. He had he pitched all those innings. He had a 2.28 ERA, so it's even more impressive that he was able to keep the ERA that low over that many innings. Already mentioned that he induces a lot of ground balls, but one thing I was listening to the John Boy guys, the Talking Baseball guys, talking about he does induce a lot of ground balls, so could the shift rules, burn him a little bit, set him back a little bit. I'm not sure if I fully buy it. I think he's, probably good enough, and I'm sure the team will play decent enough defense, but, this guy should be in the running for a Cy Young once again. All right, dud category. We're going to go elsewhere in their rotation, and that's going to be Edward Cabrera. Here's this Chrome rookie from last year. This guy's a 24-year-old. Like I said, rookie last year. He has really solid stuff. He's a big stuff pitcher, He's got a big frame. He's a big dude. He throws hard. The whole 9 yards there. But he's really a prime regression candidate when you look beneath the hood a little bit on some of his numbers. Last season at the major league level, he had a 207 batting average on balls in play. The league average is 300. So balls that were put in play that weren't home runs, the batting average on those balls for him was nearly 200, which is just completely unsustainable. The chances are that gets back up closer to 300. Maybe not quite 300, but closer to that league average most likely. And he's going to really, that will definitely lead to some more base runners, more runs, more stressful innings. He also stranded a lot of runners, so he didn't allow as many as he probably should have given that BABIP, but then some of those that he did were stranded, which is also a generally unsustainable thing to do. So, those two factors, the BABIP and the stranded runners, were a big factor in him spinning out a 3.01 ERA last year. So when you look at his FIP, which is his fielder independent pitching, which takes into account walks, home runs, strikeouts, tries to isolate a pitcher's actual performance, it was over 4.5. So I think that a lot of those numbers tell a different story about this guy, and I think it's very likely that this guy's going to be a big regressing candidate this year. Not to say he might not have a good career in the future, figure some things out, continue pitching better, but this upcoming year especially, if he regresses back to the mean a little bit, we might be looking at more like a 4 ERA pitcher than the 3 ERA pitcher we saw last year. All right, prospect watch. 21st ranked farm system, so not that great for a team that tends to struggle and really needs to develop talent from within because they don't really spend any money. But their prospect to watch is this guy, Yuri Perez. I actually just recently pulled this out of a Topps Heritage box, opened that box on the channel sometime last week, I think, or a couple weeks ago. He's the 10th ranked prospect on average. I think I just said that James Wood was the 10th ranked prospect on average, but the way that the averages shook out, they both averaged out to the same number. So they're both right there, kind of in that top 10 range. He's a big, big boy. I mean, I was just talking about the big frame of Edward Cabrera. This is an even bigger, bigger boy. He's a 6'8" starting pitcher with a plus fastball and a plus changeup. So really, really nasty stuff from this guy. Strikes out a ton of batters, and just given his age, I think he's very young. I don't know if I jotted it down, but let's see if it's on here. He was born in '03, so he's just 20. He'll be 20 years old in April. And given his age, he is an incredibly advanced pitcher for, like I said, his age and his experience level. So, I think he's going to manage to break into the major leagues. I wouldn't be shocked if he breaks in this year. The Marlins tend to like to bring these young pitchers up relatively quickly, especially if they show that they're ready. But if not this year, certainly next year. So, the Marlins could have between Alcantara, if Edward Cabrera doesn't regress into some crummy pitcher, Perez, if they get Sixto Sanchez back healthy, if they get Max Meyer back on track, who was a very high draft pick for them, they could have a serious nasty rotation in the next few years that makes them a real contender in the NL East for a year or two before they start letting those guys hit free agency and not re-signing them. So Yuri Perez is definitely a guy to watch out for. I know pitchers aren't the sexiest in the hobby, but this is a guy who, like actual baseball wise, could be really nasty. All right, bounce back candidate. I got a little bounce back candidate here. It's going to be Jorge Soler. So this is a nice finest autograph to 150, a blue to 150. You can see that right there. This is actually in my Send to Vinny T from the Professor Collector Group pile. We've had a long running trying to work out a trade for a few autographs, and this has been in that pile for quite a long time. So Vinny will close that one out someday. But Soler's had back-to-back pretty disappointing seasons. So other than his stretch run and really nice postseason with the Braves in 2021 when they won the World Series, he's been a bit underwhelming, I think, by his standards. So he's looking back at his career, he didn't have like the strongest start to his career like I thought he did, but he did have some really nice years in there. He has had some years where he's hit for some serious power, even if he hasn't done a whole lot else. But it is worth noting that last season, before he got derailed by injuries and got hurt, he was on pace for 30 home runs. So if he could stay on the field, I would expect that that's something that he could do. If he could stay on for the entire season, he's probably going to pop 30 homers. Even if he's not going to hit for a high average, he's never been a high average guy. Even if he doesn't do any of that, he's definitely a 30 plus home run threat in the middle of that Marlins order with not a whole ton around him, but with guys like Arias and some others setting the table. He could definitely clean up a little bit if he could just keep himself healthy. All right, sleeper watch. I got a little sleeper here for the Marlins, and that's going to be Jose Sanchez. So this is his rookie gold from 2021. So it would be very nice if he broke out and became a solid player or even a star. Given that I have his gold here, never really pulled any nice rookie golds, but he had a pretty solid rookie season in 2021. He had a 115 OPS plus in the 64 games that he played, so not a huge sample, but he performed pretty well. Last year he regressed a little bit. He hit 14 homers in 98 games. I think he hit 14 homers in the 64 games that year before, and then he had a similar number of homers last year in 98 games. So his the average fell, the power fell. He's having a really nice spring, though, statistically. Not that you want to read too much into spring training statistics, but if he gets a chance to be a full-time player for the Marlins this year, I'm not exactly sure where he'll play, probably somewhere in the outfield. You have Brian De La Cruz, you have Jazz Chisholm moving to center. I should mention Jazz Chisholm when I'm talking about stud, because I do love Jazz, but, Sandy Alcantara is obviously the stud of this team. But if you think about it, I mean, if he's getting everyday playing time in either right or left field, he has definitely a good chance to bop out maybe 25 home runs this season. So definitely a nice potential sleeper candidate if you're thinking about, a deeper fantasy league or anything along those lines. All right, over under 73.5 wins. They won 69 games last year. I think that they're going to be over. I'm going to go over. They're not maybe going to be a 500 team. They're probably still going to be a sub 500 team, but I don't think they're going to be a sub 70 win team either. So I have expectations for this team. I think the additions outweighed the losses. The pitching is decent. They obviously, like I said, have the best pitcher in the league, or one of the best pitchers in the league with Sandy Alcantara. So they're going to keep themselves relatively competitive as long as they hit just a little bit. All right, next up is going to be the Philadelphia Phillies, the reigning National League champions. Coming into this actually as the third seed in this division, the third expected team, and that's not really in line with my expectations, but we'll get to that in just a minute. So, in terms of additions, they had a pretty busy offseason. They added Trey Turner, one of the best shortstops in the game, to a big money contract. They brought in Taijuan Walker from the Mets. Matt Strom, who's a fellow collector. Matt's what do they call him? Stadium Pulls. Is that his YouTube? I don't know if he's still doing that these days. Craig Kimbrell, Gregory Soto, who's a pretty nice reliever that they brought in from the Tigers. And then on the loss side, they got rid of Thor, Noah Syndergaard. They traded away Matt Bierling and Nick Mattin. That was in the Soto trade. They lost Kyle Gibson. They lost Zach Efling. They lost Brad Hand, and they lost David Robertson. So some pretty notable names there, but no one who's gonna you're not gonna be crying over. But as far as their stud goes, I think it's gonna be Trey Turner right out of the gate. I think I showed off this same card, but maybe the Chrome version when I was talking about him leaving the Dodgers in one of my first videos. But I've said it a number of times with a few guys in these videos. He immediately becomes the stud of this team. He immediately becomes the best player on this team. He's Captain America right now after the big grand slam he hit in the WBC. Right after I'm filming this right after the USA lost to Japan in the WBC 3-2. Really, really fun tournament. I'm not going to get into the WBC too much, but I think this year really put that tournament on the map. And I'm expecting big things out of it every 3 years going forward, because I think people really got into it this year, and it really took itself to another stratosphere. But, this guy kind of became Captain America. People fell in love with him after hitting that Grand Slam. But this guy, he's just a whole package kind of player. I mean, he's, perennially a top 5 fantasy pick. He's got 20 to 25 home run power. He's got 30 to 40 stolen base potential. He hits 30 to 40 doubles a year. He hits 300. He's phenomenal with the glove. He's one of the just tremendous base runners. He has one of the slickest guys sliding into bases that you'll ever see. Go watch videos of Trey Turner sliding. It's absolutely mesmerizing. So I think he's going to come in and be a totally new dynamic for this Phillies team, and he's really going to be a tremendous table setter for the team. And I'd be remiss, of course, if I didn't mention Bryce Harper. This is a beautiful Topps Finest rookie card of his that I don't know what I pulled this out of. It was either out of a pack or it was in some sort of mystery box. I don't know what it was from, but really sweet card there. So he will be missing, I think, the whole first half of the season with some sort of injury that he's recuperating from. But the Phillies were able to do well without him last year for a period of time. Similar to this, so we'll see obviously if they're able to sustain that, and then when he comes back, it's going to be a real shot in the arm, because this guy's a perennial MVP candidate every single year. All right, on to the dud, our regression or bust candidate. I'm going to have to go with Nick Castellanos. He had the best season of his career in 2021, but and I think that was with Cincinnati. I don't think he was with the Phillies yet. I think last year was his first year with the Phillies. But it was sandwiched by 2 seasons of basically 0.0 WAR. His WAR definitely gets dragged down by the fact that he's a pretty crummy defender. But 2020, which was kind of a lost season for certain guys with the COVID season, but he had a 0 WAR then. And last season was just so dreadful for him all around that he also had a 0 WAR in that season. So tremendous 2021, showed a ton of upside. People thought he was going to be this big breakout guy, and then he just regressed back to being just pretty horrendous last season. So the bad defense is one thing, but it gets compounded when he obviously just collapses as far as offensive production goes. So his hard hit rate, which I talk about a lot on some of these videos when I'm looking at these guys, dropped 12% from 2021 to 2022. And it's not because his 2021 numbers were just through the roof and he came back down to a norm. It really collapsed on him. Compared to his norm. It's a really insane drop-off. His BABIP, his batting average on balls in play that we talked about a little before, was 326. So above the league average of about, I think it's 297 or 298, right around 300. So he had a kind of above average BABIP, so maybe a little bit of extra luck there, and he still had horrendous offensive numbers. So I'm not really sure if I don't think he's certainly not going to get back to his Cincinnati level of production, in my opinion. Even playing in a hitters friendly park like Citizens Bank. And I'm not even sure if he can get back to his Detroit level production, which was, kind of, it would be splitting the baby a little bit. So, not a guy I'm particularly enthused about heading into 2023, as you could tell. All right, prospect watch. We have the 22nd ranked farm system, according to Keith Law. So, again, another team in the bottom third. But the prospect to watch, this guy is an absolute stud. It's Andrew Painter. This was another one I found. This is a USA Baseball, one of these Stars and Stripes baseball parallels, numbered to 249 of Andrew Painter before he was even drafted. That I happened to find in my parallels box. So just going through random stuff, seeing what's in there, all that. So he's the 8th ranked prospect on average, so even a little bit higher than the last two guys we talked about, who are also top 10 prospects. Another big boy, 6'7", right-handed starter, elite fastball, blazing through the minor leagues last year. He struck out 155 guys in 104 innings in both A and double A ball combined. So that fastball absolutely plays, and frankly, he could probably crack the rotation. He probably could have cracked the rotation coming out of camp, quite frankly, if it didn't turn out that he was nursing an injury. But I could certainly see this guy with an injury, with some bad play. If somebody on the back end of that Phillies rotation isn't performing, I could certainly see this guy at just 20 years old bursting into the major leagues. He really seems like the type of guy who could do that. And he's probably, I think he's the top pitching prospect in baseball right now. He's an absolute stud. And, at his young age, he's another guy similar to Perez, like we talked about with the Marlins, who's incredibly advanced. He misses a ton of bats. And if he could just stay healthy, he's the potential to have a really special career. All right, bounce back and sleeper candidate. Or you know what? Not bounce back. This is going to be my breakout candidate. It's going to be Alec Bohm. And I love these Beam Team cards from Stadium Club Chrome. They look so nice. This is from his rookie year. Bohm is another guy similar to so many guys from that 2021 rookie class who just haven't really lived up to it, haven't really fully panned out. He's a former top 40 prospect, so he cracked the top 50. I think he might have gotten into the top 40 at one point, before 2021. And he's had a kind of disappointing start to his career, at least compared to expectations. It's not like he's been truly dreadful, but compared to the expectations that people put on him, he's been pretty underwhelming. So he definitely made progress last season. He's having a tremendous spring. He's had an improved, everything I'm reading is that his approach in general is improved. He added some strength and some muscle to his frame. So he's having himself a really strong season offensively, which is great to see because I think he can, solidify himself in the middle of that order. And the Phillies are going to need that level of offense, at least until Bryce Harper comes back. But, if he could take the next step with the bat, he's going to get himself into a position where people are going to start talking about him potentially in the top 10 third baseman. The real problem for him is that his defense is horrendous. He's one of the worst defensive third basemen in baseball, which is actually probably going to hold him back from that top 10 third baseman conversation. But if he could really take things to the next stratosphere as far as offense goes, he might find himself in that discussion, or they might have to, just put him at a different position potentially. Eventually, because they're not going to be able to justify taking his bat out of the lineup. All right, a sleeper for this season is another guy who's been a recent rookie, and that for me is going to be Bryson Stott. So Bryson Stott is a guy that I've actually liked quite a bit since his prospect days. Here you have his first Bowman paper. I actually just pulled this out of a rookie card explosion box. I had it lying here on the card table, and I was like, oh, you know what, this is a perfect one to showcase on the preview video. So he's a guy I've liked since the beginning when I first got introduced to him. He was I would say kind of like a mid-tier chase in Bowman 2019. I wouldn't say he was one of the top guys, but he was in kind of probably that second tier. So he was a guy I looked into a little bit back then, and I liked his makeup. I liked what he was all about. He played a bit of shortstop last year. He kind of bounced around, I think, to a few positions. Most of his time was spent at shortstop after he came up. But now with Trey Turner coming in, obviously, he should be able to spend his full time at second base, which I think is a little bit better of a position for him. And obviously, it's a less, defensive burden than playing shortstop, which I think will be good for him in his development and being able to focus on his bat and other things. So, he flashed double-digit homer and stolen base capacity last season. He had, I think, 10 home runs and stole 12 bases, or vice versa. I think it was 10 homers and 12 steals. But when you look at this guy's makeup, he was a 340 hitter in college, all throughout college. He was a 300-plus hitter in the minor leagues. So he definitely has really high average potential. And if he can be a guy over the course of a whole season that can go 15-15, homer and steals with a 300 average while playing pretty decent defense at second base, that turns into a pretty valuable player. So definitely a sleeper candidate for me. I think he takes the next step this year, especially playing full time, especially being under the tutelage of a guy like Turner. I think he's really going to turn a corner and turn some heads this year. All right, over under 89.5 wins. They won 87 last year, getting themselves into a wild card spot before going on that great run to the World Series. They are missing Harper for half the season, so that has to come into effect. But like we said before, they were missing him for a big chunk of the season last year, and were able to weather that storm. I just feel like this team got better kind of all around. I think that their bullpens have been improved. I think that their rotation is pretty solid, adding like Taijuan Walker. I think Taijuan Walker's better than Syndergaard, for example. I think their offense got better, obviously, adding Trey Turner into the mix, giving them like such a more dynamic, much more dynamic lineup. You have, maybe Bowman Stott taking a leap forward. Maybe you have Painter coming up and just, lighting the world on fire with that fastball. I think this has got to be a 90+ win team. I don't see how they've really regressed from last year at all. I'm big on the Phillies this year. I think that they should be a favorite, potentially even for this division. They're definitely going to be right in the mix. I don't think that they deserve to be 5 or 6 games behind in the over-unders, but behind the Braves and the Mets, who I know have a little bit more firepower. But I don't know. Their Phillies are a team I like. I'm going with over 89.5 for sure. All right, next up, we have the Atlanta Braves down in Georgia. Pretty busy offseason for them. They made a handful of moves. They added Sean Murphy. So we showed this bad boy off, and I have a number of different Sean Murphy rookie cards, but I still have this one laying around for my NL or my AL West video when I was talking about him leaving the Athletics. So they added Sean Murphy, and I think it was a 3-way trade. They gave up William Contreras, who went over to the Brewers, and then there was Esteury Ruiz, who went to the Athletic. There was a whole bunch of moving pieces in this one, but Sean Murphy is going to be the new catcher for the Athletics, and he's definitely probably one of the top 10, if not top 5 catchers in baseball. So solid addition for them for sure. On the addition side, they also added Colby Allard, who was a former Brave. They brought him back from, I think, Texas. Sam Hilliard from Colorado, Joe Jimenez, Nick Anderson, and Jordan Luplow. So not a ton of big names there. On the loss side, they did lose to free agency to the Chicago Cubs, Dansby Swanson. So, Dansby was the kind of, corner piece of their infield, their shortstop, their big guy, obviously, especially after they lost Freddie Freeman. But they have so many other talented players, Riley, Austin Riley, Ozzie Albies, so many others that, they may be able to kind of absorb this blow. Their shortstop position's actually been a bit of a cluster F this spring so far. We'll get into that a little bit. We'll talk about one of those guys. But they also lost Kenley Jansen, Adam Duvall, William Contreras, we mentioned, and then Jake Odorizzi. So, Dansby is definitely the number one there who they lost. As far as their stud goes, I'm going to go with this guy. I mentioned some other really nice players like Austin Riley. I mean, there's Spencer Strider. They have Max Fried, who's one of the best pitchers in the league. But for me, it's still Ronald Acuna Jr. A healthy Acuna is one of the most electric players in all of baseball. It's that simple. I feel like he's taken a little bit of a backseat to Ohtani and Soto from that elite, 2018 rookie class, and rightly so. I mean, he's had his injuries. Soto's proven himself to be an absolute stud. He's an on-base machine. Ohtani's the best player on the freaking planet with what he does on both sides of the ball. So it's understandable, but, this guy from 2018 to 2021, when he was on the field, was literally as good as anyone, just statistically as good as any player. He hits for power. I think he had a 40-40 season in maybe 2019 or pretty close to it. He might have been like 38-40. It was something ridiculous. But this guy has 40-40 potential. Only a handful of guys have ever won 40-40 in the entire history of baseball. And, he was right on the precipice of it as like a 20-year-old or a 21-year-old, whatever he was at the time. So if he could just find the health, he will certainly refine the power, right? He had a little bit of a power outage, but I think that is largely related to some of the injuries. So when he refines that power stroke and puts a full season together, watch out, because I think people are really sleeping on this guy. I think he's a little bit, down just because of the injuries, similar to like a Tatis or some of these other guys who have experienced the same thing. But he's gonna burst back onto the scene as soon as he has a healthy season. All right, dud. I'm gonna have to go with Vaughn Grissom. And this is kind of a recent development for me. I was having trouble coming up with who I wanted to go with for my dud section here for the Braves, but um, Vaughn Grissom actually ended up getting optioned down to AAA. So this guy had a really tremendous season filling in at second base last year while Ozzie Albies was injured because obviously Dansby was the shortstop for the Braves. And he could do it with the bat. I think he hit something like 340 or 331 or something along those lines in spring. And this is probably a little unfair to him to classify him this way. I don't want to call him a dud because he is a really good player. He's only 22 years old. He made a quick jump to the bigs and had success right away when he probably wasn't even like fully ready yet. He could have used a little bit more seasoning, but apparently his defense is just so bad at shortstop that they just had to send him down. They couldn't even justify keeping him on the opening day roster. They had to send him down to the minors to kind of figure it out. And I don't know if they know like what his future with the team's going to be if they don't trust him to play shortstop. Obviously, they have Albies blocking him at second. They have a full outfield. They have Riley, who I think plays third. So like I don't know where this guy fits going forward, but his bat certainly plays. He has a bright future if he could figure out some of these defensive woes or ends up with a team where he could, maybe play second base, where he seems to be a little bit better. But 2023, it just seems like is not going to be this guy's year, which is sad because I think I had him in my top 10 rookies from Series 1. I think I had him 8th or something, and this development, I think it shocked a lot of people. To be perfectly honest, I think people were taken off guard. All right, prospect watch. The Braves have a truly horrible farm system. There's no way around it. They have the 29th ranked farm system in all of baseball. They have nobody in the MLB pipeline top 100. But they do have, this guy is probably a pretty decent prospect, all things considered. It's Jared Schuster. So you see his first Bowman here from 2020 draft. He's a big right-handed pitcher. He did play in the futures game last year, even though he isn't a top 100 prospect. So, he's got a little bit of that going for him. He actually might make the rotation out of camp. I'm not exactly sure where that stands, but he probably will crack the rotation at some point during this season, which is good for him. He pitched at Wake Forest. I think he actually was kind of bad early on at Wake Forest. Like if I'm thinking of the same guy, I think he had pretty crummy numbers at Wake Forest early in his career. I could be confusing it with a different prospect I was researching, but he really made a name for himself in the Cape League. So the Cape Cod League is the most elite summer baseball league for college ball players, and he really made a name for himself that summer season that he played up at the Cape, and got himself on a lot of teams' radars. Got drafted by the Braves, I think was he a first round pick? He was a first round pick, 25th overall. So that Cape League really propelled him to a different stratosphere as far as that goes. And he does keep getting better and better at every level. So I do have that note here. So I do think it was the guy I'm thinking of, where he kind of started off slow in college. He had the good Cape. He kept getting better. He came into the minors, and he just kind of keeps getting better at each level, which is really, promising stuff. Not an ace, probably not an ace, but I think he's going to be a really serviceable left-handed pitcher in the major league. So, not someone that you're going to get like yourself totally excited about, like an Andrew Painter or Yuri Perez, but serviceable left-handed pitcher, certainly someone who could add some value to the Braves this year. All right, bounce back candidate. It's going to be Eddie Rosario. So this guy's been a really solid major league player for pretty much his entire career from 2017 to 2021. He had, on balance, really, really nice years, always above average. But 2022 was just horrible. I mean, he had a negative WAR. I think he had like negative 1.3 WAR in just 270 plate appearances with a 64 OPS plus. So that's just to be able to produce a negative WAR in that few plate appearances is really something else. You have to be really, really bad. So apparently a lot of it came down to he had some sort of vision issue, and he had to have like a corrective eye surgery, and he was having trouble seeing. Obviously, he wasn't able to see the ball. He wasn't able to read pitches. So if that's corrected, which it seemed like it has been, I would expect him to bounce back to that 2017 to 2021, level of production. So not a superstar player, but a super serviceable outfielder. A guy who's probably in that 115 or so OPS plus range. So an above average player, decent defender. So definitely a guy who, if you're talking fantasy again, is probably going to go undrafted, if not like in the very, very last rounds, but could be a guy that you snatch up later on if you're in a pinch needing an outfielder, because I think he's going to have a decent little season. All right, over under for the Braves. They are at 94.5 wins. They won 101 last year, so obviously this is projecting them to be quite a bit under their number from last season. But I'm going to go over. I think that they are a really strong team top to bottom. I love Acuna. I love Riley. I like Albies. I like the rotation. Fried and Strider and all these guys are really solid. They have a decent bullpen. Um, just a good young team who's locked up. You know, they have this core locked up. These guys have a rapport together. And when the lineup's healthy, it's pretty much as good as anybody. I didn't even mention Matt Olson, who's just hitting nukes in spring training. I think he has 6 or 7 homers already. That guy looks like he's ready to have a huge monster power season. So I like this team a lot. I think they're going to win the division. I think they're going to be a World Series contender once again. Really, really like the Braves this year. All right, we just passed the 40-minute mark. Let's try to get out of here in the next, obviously in under 10, as I was thinking this one might go a little shorter, but alas, here we are. And to close it out, we're going to have the New York Mets, the Metsies, here out of New York. So offseason moves, they obviously are a very busy team every offseason now with Steve Cohen at the helm. Their big addition was Justin Verlander. Got this turkey red rookie card of his. They signed him to a 2-year, $87 million contract. So they're paying this guy like $43.5 million a year at age 40, which is truly insane. But he really did have a very special season last year with the 1.75 ERA, winning the Cy Young, looking totally unhittable. But we'll get to kind of some of my thoughts about that in just a minute. They also added Kodai Senga, the top pitching guy coming out of Japan. They added Jose Quintana, who I think is already on the shelf with some sort of injury. They brought in David Robertson, who they're certainly going to need to be good now with Edwin Diaz going down in the WBC. Omar Narvaez and Tommy Pham, so a couple smaller ones there. On the loss side, they lost Jacob deGrom, so perhaps the best pitcher on the planet when he's healthy and going good. So, you know, a big loss for them. But when you consider him and Verlander, it's probably a wash right there. So I don't think they got better. I don't think they got worse. I think it's a wash. They also lost Chris Bassett. They lost Taijuan Walker, Seth Lugo, Trevor May, and Michael Givens. So, you know, a handful of guys who were formerly in the rotation and bullpen are now out. They also lost Dom Smith, who they might have gotten rid of before the end of last season, but we already mentioned him going to the Nationals. All right, going with stud. The obvious answer here is Verlander or Scherzer, but I'm gonna showcase Pete Alonso. I love this guy. I mean, Verlander came off the Cy Young season with the 1.75 ERA. We just talked about it. Super special season. You know, Scherzer is just out of his mind. Pitches phenomenal every single time. But I love power hitters. I got to go with them. I got to go with my guy, Big Meat Pete. I got to be able to show off this awesome Phoenix rookie, number to 299. I love Pete Alonso, and he's squarely in his prime. He could easily hit 50 homers in a season like he did that rookie season. You know, he led the league in RBIs last year. He was actually tied with Aaron Judge in for RBIs, which is just amazing given the season that Judge had. I mean, I know Judge pretty much batted second most of the time, so he wasn't in as many like big RBI spots as Alonso was as a 3-4 hitter. But I just love Alonso. I think he's a tremendous player. He's so easy to root for, and I think he could challenge 50 home runs. And they're gonna, you know, we know they're gonna pitch if these guys obviously stay healthy. But he's going to have to anchor that lineup for this team to be successful this year. All right, bust candidate. I'm going to go with Starling Marte. So big signing for the Mets last offseason, guy people were really excited about. When he plays, he's quite good. But, you know, he's pretty much been a lock to miss 40 games every year for the last few years. It's like clockwork. He misses, you know, 40 or so games, plus or minus a little bit. He's also turning 34 this season, so the decline is coming, and it's the kind of thing that comes for a guy like Marte, whose game is based around his legs. It comes a little bit faster, and it's going to sneak up on him, and I think it's going to start hitting like a ton of bricks pretty soon. I mean, when you look at his sprint speed stats, that's already been in decline for the past number of years, and that's probably only going to continue to slow down. So he is a career 290 hitter who's gone 20-20 in his career, but like I said, I think the clock is just going to start ticking and start running out relatively rapidly. All right, prospect watch. 15th ranked farm system according to Keith Law, so you know, right in the middle of the pack, the Mets. You know, the two top guys in their rankings everywhere are Francisco Alvarez and Brett Beatty, which is rightfully so. I probably could have talked about Alvarez here a little bit, but I'm going to consider both of those guys part of the big club Not sure if Alvarez is going to break camp with the team, but I think he's going to be their starting catcher relatively quickly. Obviously, Beatty's expected to be in the mix and be a starter for or on the roster on opening day. So I wanted to highlight this guy here, Kevin Parada. He was a draft pick last season. He was a pretty sexy guy in Bowman draft. You see his this gold insert I have of him here, number to 50. The draft night insert. A pretty nice looking insert set. I love gold. I always just love gold cards. I don't love the Topps golds that look like mustard, but any kind of chrome gold refractor is just so phenomenal. So Parad is the 50th ranked prospect on average, so kind of middle of the pack in the top 100 prospects right now. But he has pretty minimal minor league experience. He only came into the fray last season. He was just drafted in 2022, so his experience is pretty low. But he's expected to be an offense-first catcher. So obviously they already have Alvarez ahead of him. So what they're going to do with Parada, I'm not sure. But he's potentially borderline to even stick at the position. So maybe he ends up somewhere else, maybe a third, maybe a first, maybe an outfield. Who knows where he ends up? But the scouts do believe his offense will be adequate, or his defense will be adequate. Being carried by that big offensive bat that they expect him to have. So, catching is a really hard position to stick at, and a lot of guys don't end up being able to do it. But he's blocked, like I said, he's blocked by Alvarez anyhow for the next handful of years, so he has plenty of time to develop, plenty of time to continue getting better in the minor leagues. But he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on over the next, 2, 3, 4 years for sure. All right, breakout candidate. Just mentioned him as a guy who's going to be part of this team. It is Brett Beatty. So I don't really like expecting like a quote-unquote breakout from a rookie. I think it's unfair. I think they need time to adjust to the major leagues, but I think he's going to take over the third base job relatively quickly if he doesn't get it right out of camp and just basically never looks back. I really like Brett Beatty. I'm a believer in his bat. His minor league stats last year were like if you extrapolated them over a full season, I forget exactly how many games he played, but if you projected them out to say like 150 games played, it would have been 30 homers, 35 doubles, 95 RBIs. So I mean, this guy is the real deal offensively. If he could just get the opportunity and make it his own, I think he's going to be somebody who's very, very good for the Mets for quite a long time. And it's just a matter of when he gets that chance. All right, a couple of sleepers I have. I only have one card, but I'm going to mention two guys. It is Tyler McGill and David Peterson. So neither particularly sexy. McGill actually started for the Mets on opening day last year with DeGrom being injured and Scherzer being injured at the time. I think both of these guys are going to have plenty of chances to shine this year simply because of there's just going to be so many opportunities. Quintana's already out for an extended period of time. Scherzer and Verlander are a safe bet to miss at least 5 starts apiece, if not more than that, just given their kind of like recent, history and their age. There's always question marks when Japanese pitchers come over in their first year, so who knows what happens with Senga, whether it's injuries or whatever else. Diaz is out. We mentioned Edwin Diaz is out for the entire season with a torn ACL, so they might go with like a 6-man rotation, try to rely less on the bullpen. There's so many opportunities that McGill and Peterson are both going to have to show off. I think this is a year that they're like at least one of the two of them really needs to take the bull by the horns and take it to the next level. All right, New York Mets over under. Their over under is 95.5 wins, one better than is projected for the Braves. They won 101 last year. Maybe I'm just being a hater. I don't think that I'm a Mets hater. I don't have any issue with the Mets. They're not like the Red Sox for me. But I'm going to go with under 95.5. So I did under for the Dodgers, which people were probably surprised by. I'm also going to go under for the Mets. I really like this team. They're a super talented team. Steve Cohen is doing all the right things. But I just don't know if they got better from last year. Like they brought in Verlander, but he's 40 years old. They lost DeGrom, so to me that's kind of a wash anyhow. They crumbled down the stretch in typical Mets fashion, even though they won 101 games. They should have won this division by like 10 games. To rely heavily on Verlander and Scherzer, who's also 38 and misses a lot of time, I don't know. And you're missing your superstar closer, which obviously is leaving a bad taste in a lot of Mets fans' mouths. I could see this being a disappointing season in a season that they are also looking at as World Series or bust. All right, that's going to wrap it. Closing in on 50 minutes. Can't believe this has been the longest one of the bunch. And, of course, tomorrow is going to be the AL East, which is my division with the Yankees, so I'm sure I'll ramble there the most. But we'll see what that brings. So anyone who's made it this far, really appreciate you guys watching. Hope you're enjoying these. I'm having a lot of fun making them. and just talking baseball and interacting with you guys. Otherwise, like, comment, subscribe. We'll be back tomorrow. Excuse me. We'll be back tomorrow, like I said, with the AL East, and then more fun stuff next week with more card openings and different things that I'm going to be showing off from my collection. So, thank you guys as always. The best is yet to come. I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.